To determine what makes a vampire, you have to define vampirism. And the current accepted definition of vampirism is a physiological condition wherein the sufferer either does not produce enough of or all of the essential energies needed for daily life, meaning that simply getting out of bed is a chore for us. So we have to pull it from an outside source. I'm not eternal, I'm not everlasting other than my soul, not super strong. It's been over-glamorized by Hollywood, and too many people have gotten too philosophical about it. And they try to make it a spiritual condition, and there's too many cues that show that it's a physical condition. And it's like when I haven't fed properly, my hair's limp and lifeless, my eyes are dull, my skin is pale. When I do feed properly, it shows. Everything, like my hair, all bouncy, and my eyes gleam, and not pale.
It's not a victimized role, as many people in the vampire culture think. That's what I'm trying to change. It's not bad to be a vampire, it's great. You're not cursed, you're blessed. I think people putting negative connotations on it are going away because it's more accepted because of the craze right now. I mean, this vampire craze is it's year 2 now. True Blood and Twilight are at the same time now, Vampire Diaries. All this fantasy television media shines light on the vampire lifestyle.
Lifestylers are generally those who like to dress in the Edwardian, Victorian era clothing and run around to these little parties and just dress to impress. And then you have the role players, and the role players usually say they're from clan such and such. The vampire community as a whole generally uses the term house. If you belong to a group, it's generally termed a house.
So today people live more of a lifestyle that's kind of, we can go out in the day, we never sparkle. Some people claim light sensitivity. I just think, in my opinion, why vampires like the night is there's just not as much noise, and it's easier to collect energy because everyone's sleeping. And I think dreams are the place where vampires really feed most from. Vampires committing crimes, every culture has its wackos, and we're a little bit more eccentric from the mainstream, but I don't think that we imply any form of criminal activity as part of our culture. It's something we shy away from, actually, because the more crimes that are committed, the less freedom we have.
As far as those that go back through New Orleans history, there's only 2 that I would possibly consider truly vampiric. And that's Jacques Saint Germain and the 2 brothers.
1928, 2 young men by the last name of Carter moved into a building. They lived there quietly for 4 whole years. Very little known about them. They didn't so much as make a peep until 1932. When an 11-year-old girl came barreling out of a side door, she made her way frantically to the police station, covered in blood, screaming the whole way. She told them that she was abducted off of the street by these 2 men, and they had actually brought her up to their grand room in their apartment, and they strapped her to a chair and gagged her. And they actually cut her wrist open several times and drank the blood directly from it. In the process, they may not have tied her up so well, and she did get out, and she brought the police back with them. When the police arrived and they found out the 2 men aren't home, they did find out, however, the apartment is anything but empty, because in the same grand room that the little girl described are 4 chairs with 4 other victims. They're all gagged, all bound, and all sliced on the left wrist. The 4 victims that were actually gagged and bound to chairs were an adult male, an adult female, a 14-year-old boy, and unfortunately a very dead 9-year-old girl who did not survive the ordeal. The police actually waited for these 2 men to arrive very late in the evening, which they finally did. And the report we have states that it took 18 very large, highly trained policemen to take down 2 men over 45 minutes because they just didn't want to go. Carter brothers were actually tried and convicted. There wasn't much of an excuse they could give for their crimes at that point. After their conviction, executed by a very crude and early form of an electric chair. They were actually buried in one of our above-ground cemeteries at the very back wall. The adult male survivor, unfortunately, went on to murder 32 people in his lifetime. Although he managed to disappear himself, we all know that he dissolved their bodies in sulfuric acid, put them in large vats. We didn't realize how many people he took until his diary was found in the abandoned building when they went to work on it, hidden into a small cubbyhole of the building itself.
In 1902, a complaint was filed by a young prostitute against one Jacques Saint-Germain, the owner of this home that we're standing in front of now. As you can see, he was a very, very wealthy man, but he was not very respected, namely because of the company that he liked to keep. That evening, he met the ill-fated beauty in the American slum that we now refer to as the Central Business District of New Orleans, brought her back here to his beautiful home. Now, she had never seen such luxury before, and she was literally taken aback, feeling like a princess, darting from room to room, marveling over each new spectacle that she saw. In particular, this very elegant Italian marble mantelpiece, the most beautiful, glistening thing that she has ever seen, and she says she just had to stop and place her cheek upon the cold exterior. And at that moment, Jacques, he lost his cool. Perhaps it was the humility of the girl. We know that he had a distaste for the upper crust. Or perhaps it was the exposed curve of her neck, which he attacked viciously from behind, using his teeth to gnash at the flesh of her throat. At that moment, she got a real lucky break. Two men began to pound on the front door, distracted Jacques so that she could break away. But then she made a really strange decision. One would think that she would want to run downstairs. There were people here. They might have helped her. She chose, however, to throw her body through a second-floor window. She then hurled herself over the gallery railing, where she plummeted more than 20 feet to the street below, broke her legs in several places. Now, she was taken off to Charity Hospital. Jacques, never seen or heard from again in the city of New Orleans. In the course of investigating this home, the police, they found a small fortune in gold, gems, and very fine wine. There were many fine rugs, very randomly placed throughout the home, no pattern, no form to them, and beneath each one was mysteriously found a gigantic stain of human blood, various sizes, varying ages. It was learned very quickly that this was not the first girl that Jacques attacked, merely the first one that got away to tell about it. Furthermore, lab testing would later prove that these wines were actually a mixture of fine Bordeaux and human blood.
People continue to believe that Jacques Saint-Germain is not only alive and well, but still living in New Orleans. In August of 1998, I was told a story by a young man who worked in one of our local restaurants. He was leaving work late one evening and wandering down the street, and it happened to be a night where there was a blackout in the French Quarter. He sees a man coming towards him who's dressed very unusually. He's dressed in very heavy clothing, some leather. It's August in New Orleans. It's over 100 degrees that evening. He finds this unusual. The man walks up to him and asks him for a light of his cigarette. He lights his cigarette, and instead of saying thank you, the gentleman responds, "Isn't it a nice night for Jack?" Not knowing how to respond, the waiter said nothing. He just walked past the man and continued on his way. As he turned down the next corner, he said he heard a swish behind him. When he turned around and looked, Jack was literally right upon him. He said the guy came up out of nowhere. He practically landed behind him. Not saying a word, Jack pushed right past him and vanished into the darkness. Many people believe that Jack was actually a more modern version of Jacques Saint-Germain himself.
The window itself, as you can see, is still bricked in. The Vampires Commission makes it law that it is illegal to change the exterior of your building here in the French Quarter in any way. The window will always be bricked in, a haunting reminder of the girl who jumped through it one night in fear, choosing for some reason a 20-foot drop instead of remaining in the room with this little man named Jacques. There was a team of 5 paranormal investigators that came to New Orleans to investigate the very famous hauntings in the Beauregard Kai's house on Charter Street, right across the street from the convent. Among them were 2 young female interns. Now, being an intern, let's face it, it's not very much fun. Fact is, these important paranormal investigators, they tell them, well, we're going to stay up in the house all night with our expensive equipment, and we're going to try and capture these spirits on film, while we need you to go to the city archives and read tome after tome in hopes that you might find something that will add to our very impressive findings. They didn't like their assignment at all. They heard about the myths, the legends surrounding the convent, which was right across the street. Vampires in the attic, pirates, nuns, this is great. We're going to do our own report. So they went to the convent and they attempted to gain access to the 3rd floor. Denied. They attempted to break in. They were escorted from the building. Now, someone, I have no idea who, told them that if they were to wait out all night in front of the Beauregard Kai's house, that they could witness these shutters opening and closing. They could actually see the vampires escaping, making their rounds to receive fresh victims. They decided to do so, and it was very early the next morning that their superiors noticed that they were missing, called the cops. Let's think about this. It's a Saturday night. Their hotel is a block off of Bourbon Street. How often do you think the cops get that call? Yeah, call us back if they don't show up in 48 hours, and we'll get right on that. So we really don't know what they were up to. We did, however, find their video. They had set up a video camera out in front of the Beauregard Kai's house on a tripod, and about 4 a.m., it appears as if someone comes up behind this, takes it up by the tripod, and smashes it into the cement. In between 4 and 7, no idea. We have no idea what happened to them. However, 7 a.m., the first morning light, the bodies were found virtually posed and virtually bloodless on the steps of St. Mary Church. The coroner's report stated very, very simply that the cause of death was blood loss. Massive. Now, this means one thing to me and to most people. It means an entirely separate thing to a coroner. These girls, they were each missing close to 80% of their blood, which is virtually a medical impossibility, through 3.5-inch lacerations behind the left shoulder blade. Kind of corresponds to where the aorta is. Right at the top of the heart, this is where the blood is thickest, richest with oxygen. The skin was torn open, separated, the aorta pulled through. This is where the blood was taken from. The coroner also then went on to talk about how no missing hair, no broken nails, no missing nails, no skin under the fingernails, no signs of a struggle at all. He went as far as to say that the makeup on their faces did not appear to be especially smeared. I mean, this is all very telling. He went to great length to make his point. He summed up his report very simply by stating that whatever happened to these girls must have happened with their own consent. And to this day, this is one of our most notorious unsolved double homicides. We don't know who did it. We don't know why they did it. And most of our vampire activity down here results in missing persons. We are the missing persons capital of the United States. And let's face facts. We live in a swamp. It is not hard to hide a body here. The way that these girls were displayed goes to show that there's some sort of activity going on that we are not aware of. And I personally am kind of happy that I'm not sure, that I have no idea what this is all about. But it hasn't been the last time. I mean, you go out to the lower French Quarter, you meet all kinds of people that fancy themselves vampires, and a lot of these people are very, very silly. I mean, they never leave the house without their cloaks, their top hats, their canes, their fangs. They put these ads up on Craigslist. Come, all ye virgins, come and for a pint of your blood, you can party with us vampires. And like I said, for the most part, it's relatively harmless. But sometimes it does end very, very badly, as is the case with these 2 young girls, and many other cases throughout the French Quarter's history. Just something we live with.